you're starting, like this, and maybe the back's flat, but then as you lift the bar off the floor, you're coming up like this, and as you come up, your knees straighten about here, right? And then you're trying to heave it up from the top there, right? Hello, Aaron Kubitz, personal trainer, functional aesthetics EC, helping men over 40 build muscle, shed fat, and perform better in their lives inside and outside the gym. Today I'm going to be talking about back pain when you're deadlifting. So there's a lot of different things that can cause your back to have pain when you're deadlifting. Some of those include rounding your back as you're lifting the weight off the floor, overextending your back, so you're arching your lower back at the top of the movement as well, can cause some back pain too. Improper breathing and bracing are some other reasons that can cause some pain. But today I want to focus on a very common issue that I see, whether with its clients that I'm training, for the first time. I'm showing them how to do the deadlift. Things that I see on social media that guys will be doing, when they perform their deadlifts. And I've seen this quite frequently, so I decided to make a video about it. Okay, so one of the common causes of back pain that I see when guys are lifting, and also something that will decrease the total amount of weight that you are able to lift in the long term, is doing this. So I show it from the side and then I'll show it from the front as well. But you're starting, like this, and maybe the back's flat, but then as you lift the bar off the floor, you're coming up like this, and as you come up, your knees straighten about here, right? And then you're trying to heave it up from the top there, right? So maybe I'm exaggerating that a little bit, but in essence, you're coming up, knees are straightening out too fast, and then you're finishing it off with your back. Now that's actually a really good way to work your butt in a way, like you're doing a reverse hyper or something, but it also places a lot of strain on your lower back as you're coming up out of that movement there. Because we've all heard the term, you should lift with your legs, not your back, right? And so what are you doing here when you're doing this deadlift? If your knees lock out, you don't have any more extension, right? If they lock out prematurely, now your back is taking over the rest of the load. So ideally, you want your knees, right, and your back and your hips to be extending at the same rate. Roughly the same rate when you're coming up and down like this, okay? So there's two possible reasons that somebody could be potentially deadlifting this way. And the one most common reason why your knees will straighten out too fast is because your quadriceps are too weak for the weight that you're lifting. And at the end of this video, I'm going to be talking about different exercises you can do to help you to strengthen up those muscles, specifically to help you correct that deadlift fault there. Now the other common reason why somebody might be extending their legs too fast in the lift is because they haven't properly set up for the lift. They haven't built tension in their hamstrings, in their hips, and set up their spine in a neutral position to begin with. Now, why is it important to make sure you're loading and creating that tension in your hamstrings and your hips? Well, it's kind of like if, I liked the analogy of like, if you are going to go and rappel off a cliff or something, right? Old school with just a rope. You don't have all the fancy gear or something like that, but you want to wrap it around a tree or something. Well, the bigger that tree is, sometimes if you have a really big tree, you don't even necessarily need to tie that good of a knot, and it will still hold it. It's because of so much surface area that you have around there, right? Whereas if a small one, there's not much surface area to hold that rope, right? So what you're doing is you're distributing that weight over a broader area on that bigger trunk. So the same thing with your hamstrings. If you are starting the weight from like way down here, right, in the hamstrings, and then it's wrapping up around the pelvis this way, and then up here, you're distributing that weight of the barbell evenly across your back, your hips, and down into your hamstrings, just like kind of like a fishing pole, right? You got the reel here. It's coming up all the way around to the bend of the rod, and that actually gives you more leverage, gives you more pull when you have that. And so you want to set up that same sort of scenario when you're doing your deadlift as well. And so that's the next thing I'm going to get into here, showing you how to two different ways to set up properly for a deadlift. Okay, so the first one, probably the most simple way, and it's a technique that I learned from a YouTuber named Alan Thrall. And so how you set up for this one is you walk up to the bar and you're going to have your feet, because we're going to do a conventional deadlift. We're not talking about sumo deadlifts today where you're out wider like this. Conventional deadlift actually has better transfer over to sports, athleticism and stuff, but it is typically a little bit harder to do, and guys will often be able to lift more, but there is some benefits for doing both kinds of deadlifts. But today I'm going to just show you how to set up for conventional deadlift. So you want to have your feet about shoulder width apart. Next thing you want to do before you bend over is you want to think about screwing your feet into the floor. So how you do that is you contract your butt muscles, right? And that's you're going to feel your pelvis rotate under. It's going to get your back nice and flat, right? Now you've built up that tension in the legs and the lower body. It's also going to be helpful too, because you're activating those butt muscles, which often, sometimes as you're coming up, if your knees are caving in as you're coming up, it's because you've lost that tension. So you want to externally rotate, get that torque built up, right, in your feet. And you're going to have the bar positioned right over the middle of the top of your feet. So you're rotating out like this. Then from there, he just said, just bend straight down and touch your toes like this, right? Grab that barbell. Now when you're in this position, you're just going to bend your knees slightly until your shins touch the barbell, right? Now you're going to, once your shins touch the barbell, you're going to sink your hips down a little bit. And as you sink your hips down, you're going to bring your chest up, rotate your shoulders down and back, and then you're going to pull the slack out of the bar, because there's a little ring around the inside of here makes the weight a little bit bigger than the barbell. And so we want to make sure that we're getting the tension out of that, because one thing that'll happen is sometimes you go up, you know that you don't have tension built up if when you go up you hear that clink like that, right? Get that little clink. So you want to pull the clink out first, slowly like this, and then what you're doing is you're driving your legs into the ground first, just like you're doing like one of those hip sled machines, right? At the gym, you're doing this hip sled machine. Think about that when you're doing your deadlift, right? So you got that barbell like this. You're rolling your shoulders down and back, pulling the slack out of the bar, keep your chin tucked, and then you're driving those legs into the ground. The other important thing you want to remember at the beginning of this is take a deep breath in at the start. So you rotate it out, got that tension built in, take a deep breath in. And at the top, that's when you're exhaling your air out. So you're holding your breath in as you're driving your legs off. You're driving through the legs. As it's passing your knees, now your hips start taking over. Your butt is taking over, and you're pushing your hips through towards the wall in front of you, or just out in front of you, right? Now to reverse the movement, you're going to take in another deep breath, right, before you go in. So maybe, depending on how heavy the weight was. If it was really heavy, you might do a couple deep breaths in and out, stabilize yourself, hold your breath, slide it down the front of your legs. The first thing you want to do, and as you're initiating this movement, is you want to push your hips back behind you, right? So initiate by thrusting your hips out behind you. Again, what that's going to do is load up your hips and your hamstrings, taking some of that load off of your lower back. All the way down to the floor like that. And then you just repeat that process. So, in from the top, screw those legs out. Then you're going to bend over. You're going to make sure that that bar is centered directly over the middle of your feet. Once you're in that bent over position, you're going to bend your knees slightly till the shins hit the bar. And then you're going to bring your back up nice and straight like this. Again, with your arms here, this is something I left out. Screw your, just like if you were going to do in a bench press, pretend you're kind of trying to bend that bar, right? And you're still holding your breath. Take the slack out of the bar, drive through your legs, all the way to the top. When you get to the top, let the breath out. And the reason you want to hold your breath is it builds that tension in your torso, right? Helps to stabilize it, right? So you're coming up, you built all that tension, okay? Now the next thing we want to do is, so that's one method to set up for a deadlift. The other method, and this is one I learned from Kelly Starrett. He was a physical therapist, CrossFit coach, and he wrote a book called Becoming a Supple Leopard on mobility and different stuff like that, and also movement techniques. But he talks about the top-down setup, right? So instead of setting up from here, because one of the problems that you can have when you're setting up the barbell down here like this is that sometimes you can't quite get that tension built once you're already in that bottom position. So he says it's better to achieve the neutral spine first in the top position and then maintain it all the way down to the bar and do it that way. So this is how he recommends you do it. Again, you're starting out with that, you always start out with that bar right in the middle of the feet. The other quick pointer here before I get started with this one is I forgot to mention, you want to have those arms straight up and down. You want the arms perpendicular. Now you can do snatch grip deadlifts, but nobody's deadlifting their max or anywhere close to their max when they're doing snatch grip deadlifts. Reason being, if you're lifting doing a lot of weight, your biceps are going to be a lot more involved when you're doing this, and there is some tendency or risk of tearing the biceps when you're out in a snatch grip like this. So now this is what Kelly recommends you do. So you're going to rotate those hips out like this, or rotate your feet out, building that tension. Set the shoulders down and back. You're actually going to almost, and this will naturally actually happen too. You achieve that neutral spine, you'll notice that your belly automatically tucks in a little bit, gets tighter, like that. So now you're here, raise those arms up like this, and then you're going to sink those hips back, loading the hamstrings. Notice how that happened. You got this hip hinge. So if you're doing a squat, it's just up and down like this, right? Here, you want to make sure you achieve that neutral spine, raise the arms up, shoulders down and back, tipping forward like this, loading those hamstrings up, and your hands naturally rest right here on the bar like that. And what I like to do is I like to get those hips coming up and down a little bit, really find my groove. So there you have it, 2 different deadlift styles for you to try out. All right, so before we wrap up the video, as promised at the beginning of the video, I'm going to tell you a couple of different exercises you can do to help to prevent the knees from locking out prematurely as you're lifting the weight up. So one of the best ones to do, and the one that I recommend you probably start with, although it is a little bit more technical movement, it'll also help you to build a stronger upper back, thoracic spine extension, right? It's going to help you to get better posture as well, better shoulder mobility. So even if it's difficult to do it, it's probably in the long run in your best interest to learn how to do it, develop the mobility to do it, because it's going to make you a better, stronger, more healthy lifter in the long run. So this is what we want to do. We're going to be, sorry, I didn't tell you what it was, but that exercise is a front squat. So I'm not going to demonstrate how to do the front squat, but one of the things the front squat is good for is that it heavily emphasizes your quads, especially VMO, or the middle vastus medialis muscle here. And then the other thing is really good for transverse abdominal strength. So you have rectus abdominis, you have the obliques, internal and external, and then underneath all that, you have your natural weight belt, which kind of cinches you in, and that is called your transverse abdominals. And the front squat works both the rectus abdominis, but also that transverse abdominis as well. So to help stabilize and get you good at protecting your spine while under heavy load, so that's a good one. The next one to do would be reverse Nordics. That's where you're kneeling down on the ground, hands in your chest, taking a deep breath, and then you lean back until you start, you don't want to go so far back that you can't come back up. Come back up like this, and then you just train those quadricep muscles pretty good with that one. And then the other one that we all know and we've all seen in the gym is just the basic leg extension. You're sitting on the machine and you're extending your knees out and back like that. That can help to build up some of that quadricep strength as well. So, and then of course, last but not least, you have your good old regular back squat. That's going to help you out building up quadricep strength too. But and that's why, like, anytime you're lifting, it's like, regardless, and I don't think there's too many people who just focus on doing deadlifts. Usually it's something like, well, I only bench press and I only do curls, right? And that used to be a thing that was much more common in the past than it is now. People are a little bit more informed now. But this is another good reason why you want to train the entire body. Because by training the entire body, it's like many different exercises that you do require multiple different muscle groups. That's why they call it compound exercise, right? They require multiple different muscle groups to execute the movement. And so if you're weak in one of these muscle groups as compared to certain other muscle groups, it's going to limit your performance in that movement. And so that's why, not only from an aesthetic standpoint, how you look, if you train your entire body, you're going to be much more balanced and symmetrical and healthier as well. But for performance reasons, we also want to make sure that we are maintaining a balanced, symmetrical physique as well. All right, guys, hopefully you liked that content. Hopefully it was helpful. If you were somebody who was struggling with this issue as well and you're starting to feel some pain in your lower back, try these tips out. And after you tried them out, come back to this video. Leave me a comment. I want to see, did this information help you out, relieve some of that back pain for you? Did it help you lift more weight in the long run too? Now granted, you might not remember because this might take a few months to start really observing the benefits in increased strength and stuff like that. But as far as the pain reduction, you should probably be able to see that almost immediately by starting to lift properly, because remember, at the end of the day, deadlifting, squatting, bench pressing, those are big movements, and usually we're trying to move a lot of weight when we're doing it. But at the end of the day, you got to remember, moving weight is not the end goal of lifting, right? If you're a power lifter, yeah, that's the goal. You're trying to move the weight, as much weight as you can from point A to point B. When we're strength training, we're trying to build muscles, and we're trying to train the movement pattern, not just see how much weight we can move from point A to point B. Funny thing is, if your form is improper, it's also going to limit how much weight you can move from point A to point B in the long run. If any big farm boy can go out there and just grab some big rocks, grab some big stuff, just hoss them in the back of his pickup truck, right? But then you can have some skinny guy, or a guy who is maybe 50 pounds lighter than him, who actually knows how to lift properly, actually has practice technique and stuff, and might actually be in fact stronger than this guy because he knows how to do the movements properly, and he's actually been training the entire body, and therefore he can use more of his musculature to move the weight. All right, guys, if you like the content that's related to program design for building muscle, shedding fat, athletic performance, if you like stuff about nutrition for health, fat loss, building muscle, and how to work around injuries in the gym, how to avoid getting those injuries, kind of like some of this stuff I was talking about here, corrective exercise stuff, then you might want to consider subscribing to this channel by hitting the button in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. All right, guys, thanks for watching the video. We'll see you all next week for more health and fitness information.